What's up, guys? Hope everyone is doing well. In this video, I'm going to be going over the Bitcoin dominance, altcoin, crypto, market capitalization, a bunch of altcoins. Really, this entire video is just focus on altcoins individually and collectively in the sense of altcoin dominance, so on and so forth. But nonetheless, going to get it started. The first thing I want to point out here briefly on the Bitcoin dominance is if we look here at the RSI down here, we can see these support lines here back from around March 2017, culminating in around December 2019, January of 2020, as the dominance broke below here with the RSI, and the price ultimately topped out. Eventually, it started going down towards the accumulation range of around 2021 to 2022. This accumulation period then began this next uptrend of the dominance, and now currently you're seeing a break below it, very, very similar, almost borderline vertical, very similar to back here in December 2019. Also finding again resistance up here with this descending trend zone. And as I've been saying, I think it's quite clear that the dominance is entering a period where, and has historically coincided with alt season, we're seeing Bitcoin towards its rough, if you were to break down the Bitcoin bull markets into thirds, we're kind of inside of and beginning that final third of the bull run. And then lastly, just to reiterate, this 50%, so this purple horizontal trend here, this 50% point is going to be important, because once the dominance here for Bitcoin starts to go below that, that is really going to be when the altcoins and their dominance starts to overtake Bitcoin dominance overall. If we look here, we have at the top, we have the total 3 crypto capitalization chart. So that's everything excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum. In the middle, we just have the dominance again. At the bottom, we have the others dominance chart, which is the dominance of all cryptocurrencies, excluding the top 10 cryptocurrencies in terms of market capitalization. First, again, you'll see here, similar with the Bitcoin dominance, you'll see an ascending uptrend here, and ascending uptrend here, similar to how I was going over the RSI just a moment ago. Up here at the top with the total 3 chart, again, you can see that it is above the descending resistance, as I've been pointing out. It's also above this horizontal resistance zone going back to the prior all-time highs. Currently, with the current candle, looks as if it's fizzling out a bit, so we definitely could see a retracement, anywhere as low as around 640 billion, but maybe somewhere around like 770, 780 billion would be a little bit more reasonable according to the vector candles and the vector zone that is sitting right below it relative to this recent pump towards the upside. But if you look down here at the others dominance chart, you can see here with these highlights, these double bottoms going all the way back to here. We see around August 2019, January 2021, June 2023, and then recently around November 2024. And you'll see each of these here. You see these 3 horizontal or vertical black lines here, and then you see these 2 relative to the Bitcoin dominance and the others dominance. But mainly I just want to point out these second and third here, where you can see as the total 3 chart is at the prior all-time highs here, and then finally entering its final bull market impulse period, you see the Bitcoin dominance is losing this support. Again, it would also be losing the RSI support here as well, as I went over. And then if you come down here to the others dominance, this is also right, which is going to be correlative to up here the total 3 chart. The Bitcoin dominance, or rather the others dominance, really starts to take off and go parabolic, and then breaking its horizontal resistance that would be right here for 2017 to 2020, early 2021. And then you fast forward to now, again, we see ascending support on the Bitcoin dominance. We're seeing the total 3 chart breaking prior all-time highs again. We're seeing, again, double bottom on others dominance, and we've been seeing quite a nice move towards the upside here for the others dominance as well. It's still quite a ways away from the prior all-time highs, all the way up here at around 18-19%. So that would be one of the really only things that kind of looks a little bit different compared to the past, but I would say ultimately that's not that big of a deal. It's fairly negligible, given that there are so many similarities to past behavior, and the fact that, Bitcoin clearly looks great, and many other things such as the dominance and other charts and points of evidence I've gone over in recent videos pointing to altcoin season being correlative to the last third of the Bitcoin bull market. Moving in here to first altcoin. Here we see Ethereum, circulating supply 120.44 million, market cap at 20K, which is a lower bound price target that I have, 2.41 trillion, market cap at 45K, which is the upper bound price target I have, 5.42 trillion, and somewhere within a ballpark range of around 40 to 45K. Depending upon where Bitcoin tops out and depending upon how late Bitcoin or how late Ethereum tops out after Bitcoin, we could very well see, for a brief period of time, see Ethereum eclipse the market capitalization of Bitcoin. But that's only if it heads towards somewhere around like 40 to 45K. Again, we see here descending resistance. The prior weekly candle right here around December 2nd up until now closed above the resistance, but our current candle seems to be fizzling out a bit. It's still currently above the descending resistance here. But similar to the total 3 chart, there's definitely room for correction here. The vector zone goes all the way down to 2.6 thousand. I don't think that's too super likely at this point. That would be around a 40% move. If we go back to a similar drop back here in a prior bull market, this was a 36% move. So I mean, again, we totally could see something like that. 36 would take it right back down. Actually, this entire vector zone is basically a 36% drop. So we totally could see that. I don't think it's the most likely scenario at this point, but definitely likely nonetheless. As I've said, the rule of thumb is that about 50% of these vector zones is necessary if it is indeed actually going to recover the vector zone to any degree in the first place. Doesn't always have to recover the vector zone, especially in bull market scenarios. As you can see back here, this vector zone was never revisited as it continued to go up, and this vector zone right here wasn't revisited until the bull market or the bear market dropped down here for Ethereum towards, approximately around $870 upwards towards around $1,200, $1,300. Overall, I think right now Ethereum does look good. I think just to generally kind of give this as a preface earlier on in this video, I think there's roughly 5 to 9 months left in the current bull market. I think we'll see Bitcoin top out earlier, so more towards the 5, maybe 4, 5, 6 month into the future from now. Whereas we'll start to see the altcoins top out. They'll start to lag, as I've spoken about recently, behind Bitcoin topping out. And then that will start to push that 7, 8, 9 month. So somewhere around, as I've been saying recently, maybe around April, well, at earliest March for Bitcoin mainly, then you start going April, May, June, July, August, September. Generally just 2025, as I've been saying recently, for the overall top for Bitcoin and the altcoin market in general. If you look here at Cardano, also looks quite good as well. It appears to be fizzling out, similar to Ethereum. And that's kind of what a lot of these are doing right now. As I spoke about in the video for Bitcoin that will be uploaded basically at the same time this one is, Bitcoin could potentially, we could be seeing it fizzle out as well. There are a number of people thinking that it might see a more significant pullback here soon after making the run that it has recently. I think it's definitely likely, obviously, but I don't think it's, at least my bias right now is that it's not what's the most likely. But if we look here for the vector zone of Cardano, it's quite large. It goes all the way down to 35 cents. Again, I don't think that's going to happen. The 50% zone sits around 55, 56 cents. And then anything upwards from there would be fair game as well. From top to bottom, I mean, if it covers around 50% of the zone, it's going to be about a 57, 60% drop. Or, I mean, if it goes all the way down to the bottom, which again, like I said, I don't think it's too likely, it's going to be a 73% drop roughly. If you go back here, in the prior bull market, there was a 50% drop. So again, we could see something similar to that. As I mentioned recently, one of the videos when I was talking about the altcoins, 50, 60, 70, 80% drops are not out of the ordinary for altcoins during a bull market. Even during a bull market, altcoins, quite a lot of them, and often so, will drop at most approximately 80% even during a bull market. Now we can see that this ascending resistance here for Cardano going all the way back to around February to April of 2023. We saw this kind of double stop resistance. We then saw something very, very similar from December 2023 to March of 2024. Right now, the prior weekly candle for Cardano around December, weekly candle on December 2nd, closed above it, but right now the current candle is sitting basically right on top of it. Currently seems to be finding resistance, so this is going to be very important to get above, which right now it just sits relative to the prior or the recent local high, just around $1, roughly around $1.15 up to around $1.30. So again, we could see this fizzle out here, make some sort of a correction, whether or not it's 50% of the vector zone, 100% of the vector zone, 30% of the vector zone. Who knows what it's going to be? I definitely don't know what it's going to be, but it's definitely going to likely recover some degree of this vector zone. Or we could, see this fizzle out. Let's say, just to kind of paint some sort of potential scenario out of the many scenarios that could take place. Maybe we'll see something like this and we fizzle out, like going sideways for 2 candles, and then we see another massive move here towards the upside. That's definitely possible as well, but getting above this is going to be very important. This is sending resistance, and then obviously the prior all-time high zone, this distribution period, is going to be very important as well, just as it would have been important for Ethereum as well, which it's pretty close. It's basically already up, I would say, gotten through most of its distribution period back here. Looking here at Bitcoin Cash, we see the circulating supply. It's going to be the same as Bitcoin is, so around 19.8 million. The market cap at 685, 13.6 billion. Market cap at 982, 19.4 billion. 1444, 28.6 billion. 1953, 38.7 billion. So this lower bound zone is going to be the 685 to around the 982. This upper bound is going to be around the 1444 to the 1953. This lower box is what pertains to the when I utilize my framework, the phase cycle framework that I have analyzed in Bitcoin's all-time historical movement, and then once you translate that to or superimpose that on top of the altcoins in order to try to project some sort of potential all-time high range, it pertains to the prior bull market here for Bitcoin Cash. So it goes all the way back to March of 2020. So either this bull run, and I was a little lenient when I was doing this just because Bitcoin Cash is just, it's in a macro downtrend, as you can clearly see here with this descending resistance. It has not gotten above it yet, like a good number of altcoins have so far. So I was a little bit lenient, and I did go back to around December of 2018, which is what pertains to this upper box right here. So the 1444 to the 1953, which is essentially just retesting, maybe going a tad bit higher than the prior all-time highs back here in the 2021 bull market peak. Now, I also think it's definitely possible that this descending resistance continues to suppress the price, and it doesn't even actually end up meeting this box. Again, now this peak back here and around the beginning of April 2024, it hit at wick high $716, which is actually at the very bottom of this range, so just a tad bit above the $685 lower bound. So for all intents and purposes, at least the lower box here, the lower bound, that is the box itself, has already been met. It could go a little bit higher, or it could go to this upper box and basically retest the all-time highs, but I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to go up from here. And I think that there's a fairly similar structural appearance here that we can see. If you look at this prior bull market right here, you can see there's 3 notable peaks. So 1, 2, 3. And I think there's something fairly similar that we're seeing here. So we see 1 peak, retracement, 2 peak, retracement, and maybe this is the 3rd peak that'll stop right here. Maybe it'll go a little bit higher right here. Maybe it'll even go up to the 2nd box, as I've been saying. But overall, this looks fairly similar. Overall, the structure is very similar. You can just see that the overall, the retracements here as opposed to here, and then here as opposed to here, have been a little bit longer, which makes sense given the maturation of Bitcoin over time and why its bear markets take longer and its bull markets take longer, while the bear markets are less bearish, while the bull markets are less bullish. Something I spoke about somewhat briefly in the recent Bitcoin video and spoke about many times in the past. We can also see a similarity here on the RSI, where you see, again, you'll see peak here, peak here, peak here, correlative to the 3 peaks in the price, and we see a peak here, and then a peak here. If it doesn't go higher, maybe it'll end up going a little bit higher towards the upside. But overall, I mean, you can clearly see, again, similarities where it's kind of just a W towards the top, essentially like a triple top, where you see this right here. And again, it's obviously taking longer this time around for the reasons I briefly explained. I also do want to point out the average sentiment oscillator here. If we go back, I believe it's actually on here. I actually forget if it's on here, but if we start back here at the beginning of the bear market of 2018, so this is the origin, then we go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this fifth cross, which is bullish, is really just right before the brunt of this bull market right here. Clearly the bull market ultimately started at the bottom, but it really went parabolic right here around this fifth cross. We do something similar right here. We see the origin, bear cross here, and we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can see that this lines up with July 2023, just shortly after this first impulse of the current bull market. And we just recently got another bullish cross here, which again, like I said, could end up culminating with the all-time high where it is right now, and this descending resistance continues to repress it because it's been in a downtrend ever since it started trading. And really even the support that we see down here at the bottom is not even really much of an ascending support. It's borderline horizontal. So I mean, over time we might not ever see Bitcoin Cash significantly overtake a prior all-time high, but it's definitely not out of the sphere of reasonability or possibility at the end of the day. If we look here at Ethereum Cash, Ethereum Cash has been doing better than Bitcoin Cash, as you can see from this all-time high back here in 2017, 2018, and then 2021 all-time high, went higher. There's the descending resistance, which it is above as opposed to Bitcoin Cash, so that's good to see. Again, there's a vector zone here, which could, as I've been saying, and again, this is another preface for the altcoin as I get further in this video. A lot of this analysis is going to stay the same, and you'll clearly notice that throughout the video, but these vector zones, again, 50% is what's necessary, but during bull markets, it doesn't have to even do 50%. It can do 10%, 20, 30, 40, or it could go all of it, like I've been saying. So, I mean, it could drop 50% down to around $23, which would line up with retesting this descending resistance and solidly flipping it into support from the top to bottom locally. If it goes 50%, around a 44% retracement. If it goes all the way down, it's around a 55% retracement. Again, if we go back to a similar stage in the bull market prior to now, we can see there was a 45, 47% retracement here. This one right here was around a 50, 55% retracement. So again, just to reiterate, totally reasonable to see altcoins go 50, 60, 70, 80% and drawing down, even in a bull market. When it comes to the circulating supply, you can see approximately 150 million. Market cap at the lower bound, $325, around 448.7 billion. The upper bound, $635. Market cap would be around 95 billion. And right now, assuming it goes towards this, maybe it goes higher, maybe it goes lower, because obviously I don't have a crystal ball, and these projections are not guaranteed at the end of the day, nor am I conveying them to be absolute foolproof, and these are going to happen regardless, because I definitely don't know that they're going to happen. But Ethereum Cash is still really roughly, as you can see here, within its long-term accumulation period right here. It's still, if you kind of take a box here, if you kind of cut this entire portion here, price down here, you can see it's still putting a little horizontal line here around roughly halfway in between it. You can see it's still below the 50% period, so I mean it's still in a good period to buy if this is something you already hold, or if this is something you are, for whatever reason you may be interested in this. From where we are now to the top, it's only around 1,000 to around 1,600%. I'm gonna actually backtrack it here a little bit. From currently for Bitcoin Cash, we can see around 70%, 200%. I personally, if I'm going to make a recommendation, I wouldn't recommend buying Bitcoin Cash. But obviously, at the end of the day, you do you, and this is not meant to be financial advice. But overall, Ethereum Cash would be the better bet if you're going to want to choose between Bitcoin Cash or Ethereum Cash. When it comes to horizontal resistance, really right now is kind of, I would say, the major point, as you can see right here. For horizontal resistance, so it needs to get above around 40 to around 48, really $50 psychologically speaking, and then afterwards, I mean, maybe somewhere around $65 to $67, and clearly the prior all-time high. So the candle closes at around $104, and the wick high was at around $173. If we look here at Phantom, really not too much to update here. I went over every altcoin going forward from now. I went over in a recent video, and not too much has changed. All of the potential zones for a correction remain the same that I mentioned in past videos, and also for upwards zones of potential rejection, or not necessarily rejection, but a healthy correction before it continues to go higher still remain the same. So really all that I want to update here for Phantom, and a lot for these going forward, is the fact that Phantom is continuing to move above the descending resistance here. It also appears that it might be fizzling out as well, so we could see that retracement here down to one of these two small vector zones here. I don't think this one down here at around 45 to 50 cents is too likely at this point, although it's definitely possible. The 200 EMA also sits here, so that would be a good range of price to find a retracement to and support, but I don't think that's what's most likely at this point. So the retesting and flipping into support of the descending resistance here sits at around approximately 75 cents. If it does do that from top to bottom, would be around a 45 to 50% move. So that's not too bad. All things considered, it could go down, 80%. I mean, if you look back here, 80% drop down in bull market, and another, 85% drawdown in the bull market. Again, totally not out of the norm. Here for LCX, again, doesn't really look too much different. Still sitting right along the, it's slightly descending, but it's a borderline horizontal resistance. Again, appears to be fizzling out. This chart, unfortunately, does not portray any volume data, so I can't go off any vector zones. But if we look here at the 50 EMA band, it's sitting somewhere around 15 to 20 cents. The 200 EMA sits somewhere at around 12 cents. In terms of a retracement from top to bottom, the 50 EMA is going to be around a 50 to 60% drawdown. So the 200 EMA is going to be around a 72% drawdown. And if it comes back down to this long-term support zone, I mean, it could retrace as much as 85%, which again is not that out of the norm. If we look here at this retracement, the prior bull market, 78%. This retracement right here is around 75%. This retracement here was 90%. I mean, even pushing 90%, that can happen in a bull market for altcoins. If you look here at MATIC, still performing quite well. As I was going over this last time around, it wasn't doing that well, especially in comparison to a lot of altcoins. MATIC was going down roughly during this period when a lot of altcoins were making pretty good gains and moving up and moving above their descending resistances. We're seeing MATIC again fizzling out. Again, this is kind of the state of a lot of these altcoins, and even for Bitcoin right now to some degree, fizzling out right at the 200 EMA and even really the 50 EMA as well. So we could see some, we could see a little bit more of a drawdown, maybe back to this zone, maybe a little bit above it, somewhere around like 50 cents or so, or it could just kind of stagnate sideways here and then continue to move higher, especially if Bitcoin doesn't make a more of a significant kind of, medium term, intermediate retracement over the next, few weeks leading into next year. And still currently, like I said, it needs to get above this descending resistance, which sits somewhere at around, again, just to point this out, around 85 cents. That's going to be important. And like I was saying, the potential horizontal resistances still stay the same. Price projections all the same here for MATIC as well, and every other altcoin that I'm about to go over and already gone over, except for Bitcoin Cash and Ethereum Cash, because I haven't covered those recently. Looking here at THETA, again, looking quite good, moving above, closed the prior weekly candle here above the descending resistance. Currently fizzling out as well. Again, we could see a potential from top to bottom as much as a 60% retracement, maybe 50% retracement somewhere halfway into the vector zone, which lines up with the 200 EMA and the 50 EMA. Or again, like I said, it could kind of stagnate sideways here for a bit and then pump. And also just kind of generally testing this descending resistance, and then moving up here towards the all-time high projection that I've gone over. If we look here, again, ANKR, descending resistance, similar, prior weekly kind of closed just a tad bit above it, fizzling out. So, I mean, really we could see, again here, we're going to see about pushing a 60%, 50 to 60% retracement, whether it's 50% in the vector zone, also lining up with the 50 EMA and the 200 EMA. Now here for XYO, one of the ones that I'm going to be going over a little bit more in depth because there's just really all the ones that, like I said, for all the other altcoins I've already gone over up until this point, there's not much has really changed. There's not really much for me to go over other than the fact that they still just look strong and they could potentially retrace over the next few weeks, especially if Bitcoin ends up having more of a significant retracement. But if you look here on the hourly chart, I went over this in one of my recent videos I dedicated solely to XYO, and I in that video had some trend lines on here which are no longer on here, but basically kind of this looking, well, that looks very ugly, looking roughly like this. That still looks terrible. So roughly about like this was kind of potentially pointing at a falling wedge or something along those lines. And you can see that it broke out of it right here and came down and tested the upper resistance of that falling wedge, and ever since then it's been moving up, and there's been this kind of triangular descending pattern here which has been broken out of, and it's on this hourly flipped the 50 EMA band right here, found support right here yesterday, came back up again, got fairly close to the prior all-time high, or not all-time high, but the prior local high set back here from around just 4 to 4.5 cents. Currently has come back down once more and is hitting the 50 EMA band. So will we see something similar, especially if we are in the early moments of the next impulse for XYO? Because it's flipped this 50 EMA band, there's, like I said, there's a support and a bounce here. It came down, now we're back in it. Will we see something similar, and it will continue to go higher up towards that 12 to 17 cent range that I was mentioning in that video recently? Now there's definitely room for it to, come right back down. Maybe it'll come down here and, meet somewhere roughly along this 200 EMA, something along these lines might happen. That's totally possible as well. And ultimately it would probably hold this sideways resistance, which is in with respect to the 618 right here of this, this recent impulse or Fibonacci retracement. Or if it ends up losing the 618, if it loses this 200 EMA, there's this vector zone down here at around just a tad bit below 2 pennies, around 0.017 to around 0.018. 800 EMA also sits at around 0.015. And then there's these vector zones down here at a penny, and then just a tad bit below a penny, but don't lean towards it going down that low at this point. But it's also definitely possible at the end of the day. If it does end up going down that low, it's probably not going to be, too good. The sentiment for that will not be too good. But something that I want to point out here before I go into the weekly chart is if I go down to, I think the 30-minute shows it quite nicely. Let's look at the 15-minute. And if we look here at the prior impulse, I'll just take the whole thing. I think there are some rough similarities between the way it's behaved last time around. I think this right here, you can kind of see that the price, like I said, it was right here breaking the 50 EMA band, had this double bottom, then went higher. I think it looks fairly similar to this right here. We see this double bottom, and then it moves higher, and then we can see this right here, kind of another double bottom, move back up, and then it has come down further at this point, and then may or may not move back up here, assuming it's actually going to go up. But I think there's some rough similarities that you can see here on the really low time frames to the prior impulse. Just to point it out because I'm seeing it now, there is on this 15-minute chart currently quite a big increasing volume vector candle. So this yellow candle, we saw one back here after this double bottom was set, and then it ended up moving up, as you can see right here. Overall, this move was 51%. So let's say we're seeing something similar again, and to go ahead and go back to the hourly here. So ultimately, let's say what we're seeing here is that broke out of this triangle, flipped back above the 50 EMA. We found a correction, support, impulse, correction. Now we're finding support. And if we then go up once more, let's say it's to the degree of around 50%, that will then start pushing it back towards the prior local highs back here around 4 to 4.5 cents. And if it can manage to stay steady there, find support, and continue higher, we could then see that move up to around 12 to 17 cents. And what I want to point out here on this weekly chart is something that I forgot to go over in the video that I dedicated just to XYO recently. But if we look here at the Fibonacci, not the Fibonacci, but this inside pitchfork that I just brought up on here, we can see that, so if we look here again at these descending resistances here for XYO on the weekly, you can see clearly we had a breakout here in the past bull market. We're seeing a very, very similar current breakout, as I've pointed out in the recent videos. And we're seeing the candles kind of simmer off, or at least they're sitting right now around the 382 to the, I believe that's the 0.25. Very similar again. So we saw something very similar back here, and then it continued to move up to the upper bound 0.25 and 382. So if we see that something similar happen once more, and we see a mimicry or a mimicking of the prior bull market for XYO, then it will move back up to the upper bound 2.5 to 382, which sits again approximately 12 cents to approximately 18, 19 cents. Again, further validating what I was talking about in the recent video solely on XYO. And again, like I said, I forgot to go over this when I was going over that. So this is just one of the other technical reasons that is pointing to around 12 to 19 cents if XYO continues to move up here, whether or not, it's soon or it's, maybe a few more weeks, maybe even a few months go by and it kind of sits sideways, maybe sees a little bit more of a drastic correction. Perhaps we see something like this and it fizzles off here and comes down over, maybe into late January and retests the 618 here at around a penny and a half, and then finally comes up to this 2.5 to 382 at around, like I said, somewhere around. I mean, if it happens later like this, then it would increase a little bit more, so to around like 16 to 23 cents, but it's still roughly within the same ballpark. But if you are interested in XYO, like I said, I dedicated a whole video to this recently. So, and I'll have the recent altcoin video when I went over Phantom, LCX, and all the other individual altcoins, where I went over them a little bit more in depth, and I actually talked about the circulating supply, and I talked about the market caps, and I actually went over the all-time high projections. If you are interested in going and watching those will be linked as cards at the beginning of the video. Now, really what I want to point out here is the average sentiment oscillator. I pointed out this in a recent video. I just want to go over it again because I think it's very eye-opening. So similar to what I was talking about with, I think it was Bitcoin Cash or Ethereum Cash, but I mentioned this indicator earlier on in the video, where you start out here with the bear market cross. So this is the origin point 0, then you have 1, 2, 3, and on the third cross here, this is when the bull market began. The descending resistance was broken, and we then had this kind of let's say a lull period after these 3 crosses that began the bull market, where XYO went sideways and had a final stretch towards the upside here. Then we had our bear market cross here, so again we have 0, and then we see these 3 very similar crosses right here leading into the break of our current descending resistance, which then again would then lead into potentially seeing a very similar bull market as we did the prior time around. And again, so if we look here, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 crosses during our current bear market leading into bull market here for XYO. Like I said, I believe I mentioned it earlier when I was going over this indicator for one of the other coins. But for some odd reason, and I'll probably go over this a little bit more in a future video, this average sentiment oscillator, I've noticed that when you analyzing and looking at it in this way, when you go to the bearish cross that begins the bear market, you see 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, it didn't happen this first time around for XYO, but for a lot of coins, I've noticed that starting at that origin bearish cross and then counting out to 5, pushing 7, usually from that range of the 5th to 7th cross is when you want to start buying. And it's almost on nearly every single one of the coins I cover on this channel, which I find very interesting. And again, I may or may not make a video specifically going over that in the future. I may just point that out in one of my upcoming videos. If you look here at XRP, again, so this is one of the notable altcoins I'm going over in this video, XYO being one of them, has already gone over. Now XRP, one of the only coins that really has a lot for me to go over as opposed to the other ones, and I dedicated a video solely to this recently. And what the whole preface of the video, or the whole point of the video rather, was what we can see here in these text bubbles. Back in December, 4 years ago, December 7th of 2020, led to an 80% pullback during the bull market. And then December 7th of 2024, just a few days ago, will XRP do something similar? From what it looks like right now, which I'll get to in a moment, pointing out these further similarities, I think it's, fairly likely at this point. I would maybe at least like to give it like a 40, 50, 60% chance. But we can see here that we zoom into when it happened 4 years ago. And also we're seeing a time interval here of 4 years, which clearly the 4-year time period is important, not only with Bitcoin, but in the broader cryptocurrency bear market to bull market trend, and the cycles and the periodic movement of this market as a whole seems to really be fond of a 4-year periodicity. And we look here after this peak right here, we saw an inside candle, and then once the price went below the mother candle right here, it then dropped around 62%. So if we fast forward to now, we can see potentially something shaping up again, similar to what happened 4 years ago on the weekly chart, where we're seeing a massive impulse. We're currently seeing 5 days left in this current weekly candle. Will this close as an inside candle? I lean towards, that's my bias right now, I think it's more likely than not going to do that. And if it does do that, and it continues to come down lower and goes below the mother candle here, then it could potentially drop another, like I said, 60%. And if it does that, it's going to literally come right back down to the bottom of this vector zone. It will basically wipe out the entirety of this pump, which isn't, asinine to say, because that's literally exactly what happened back here 4 years ago during the exact same time of the year that we are now in 2024. If we move here to the 12-hour, and we can see here currently, you see this kind of what could potentially, assuming we see a massive drop here. Overall, we're seeing a correction regardless. I mean, like I said in the recent video, XRP has gone borderline completely vertical, so it's going to have to cool down, whether or not, it just drops to 20, 30%, or if it pushes, 60 to 80%. So we could be seeing a potential double top here that, again, like I said, takes it down very low. But what I want to compare this to, again, is going to be going all the way back to 4 years ago, December 2020. Take this entire move, the impulse into the local top, that then began the pullback, the very significant pullback. And we can see here that it is also, again, so on the weekly we saw potentially another inside candle shaping up. But if we look at the 12-hour, we're seeing, again, a very similar double top formation, where we're seeing this, move up, comes down, it's making this potential double top, and it looks, very similar to what happened last time around. Now, it's not, we're seeing XRP come down here quicker than it did this time around. Clearly on this fractal pattern or bars pattern, you can see it came up, it is double top and gradually came down, whereas now we've come up, potential double top, and we're coming down quicker. Ultimately, I would say that's negligible, but still, I mean, it looks very similar. And we're seeing basically from low time frame, 12-hour, all the way up to high time frame. On the weekly, we're seeing many things lining up in confluence that could potentially be very strongly validating, not just to help the, well, not necessarily, even if we see XRP see that 60 to 80% drop, I would ultimately still argue that it's, maybe put it in air quotes here, a healthy correction, because I think it will more likely than not go back up again and head towards the $3 to $5 range that I projected for it, and maybe even deviate towards $10. And with that being the reasonable range, I went over an even higher range that would really be pushing its limits in recent videos. Again, those will be linked as cards if you're interested in those. But to just kind of play devil's advocate against my bias right now, which right now, like I've said, I'm leaning towards this massive drop coming into play because there's just so many similarities, not only in time, but the way this 12-hour chart looks with the double top and with that weekly and that inside candle. And something I need to elaborate with that inside candle here. So I'll go back to the weekly as I talk about this. To elaborate with this inside candle that we could potentially see solidify itself over the next roughly 5 days. Inside candles aren't inherently bearish. They're not inherently bullish either. Typically within an uptrend, if you see an inside candle, it's may or may not kind of have more of a tendency towards just continuing to go up, but then in a downtrend, if you see an inside candle, it would tend a little bit more towards just continuing that downtrend. But even in uptrends, when you see inside candles, it can continue, or it can signal a change of trend. I mean, if we go back to let's see, the 2016, 2017 bull market, I can see there's an inside candle right here, and XRP then from top to bottom initiated a 70 or 67% drawdown. Ultimately, this consolidated roughly sideways and had this final impulse here, and then again we see another inside candle right here. And as soon as the candles started closing below the mother candle here, it then ended up going down approximately 90%. So even looking back at other past points in XYO's price history, we see these inside candles forming at the culmination of very strong impulses leading into substantial correction. So again, we saw it right here, and right here, which again, this is the 4 years ago in December 2020, which looks very, very similar to now. Lastly, I mean, it could just come down and test the descending resistance, which even then still would be quite a sizable retracement. I mean, 70% towards the downside, it's somewhere around like approximately 90 cents. Good look here at JASMY. JASMY is also still looks good. It looks like it also could be fizzling out like a lot of the other altcoins I'm going over. Again, there's just not much data on this chart. Don't really know what it's going to do, but nonetheless, I have gone over potential projections, really only basing where it could go just about on like how expensive its market capitalization, or how high its market capitalization could end up getting with the, while trying to maintain some degree of reasonability. Lastly here, for Dogecoin, again, let's zoom in here. Really, again, seeing some fizzling out like at most of the other altcoins. There is this ascending resistance here. It is quite similar to the one that was on at Cardano when I went over it earlier on in the video. So we could potentially see Dogecoin come down here and retest this, as it's been resistance going back to 2021, 2022, and 2024 here. So we could see that flipped into resistance somewhere at approximately 26, 25 cents. It may even look a little bit lower than that and maybe push 20 cents. That's definitely possible. Or we could see it come all the way back down to this pink descending resistance here, somewhere around approximately 15 cents. But if we compare it to what it is highly similar to in terms of the last bull market, which I went over in a recent video more in depth, would be comparing it to the beginning of the bull market, at the beginning of the prior bull market for Dogecoin, where we see this very similar movement here, and then it just bolts towards the upside, just as it did with this bars pattern right here. And you can clearly see back here, it didn't really have a substantial pullback. It just kind of fizzled out sideways, and the volatility and volume died down for a bit, and ultimately just picked back up even larger, and then had the sizable pump that it did up towards approximately 74 cents at the end of the 2021 bull market. But that was all that I wanted to go over in this video. So as always, none of this is meant to be financial advice. Please do not make any decisions based upon anything that I've gone over in this video. If anything, just kind of factor it into your own decision and just everything you see. If I said something that validates what you see, then, great. If I said something that invalidates something you see, then, perhaps maybe even I'm wrong in what I'm saying, or perhaps maybe you might want to rethink what you think. But again, not meant to be financial advice. But all of that being said, everything gone over as always, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.